Hi, this is Dr. Michael Bogart with Aspect Ministries. I've been doing a video series on toxic churches. That series explores ways that churches can become toxic. In other words, how people get damaged by churches and Christian organizations who do a bad job of representing Jesus in their communities. Just so I'm not misunderstood as being down on the Christian church, I should be very clear that not all churches are toxic. I've been a church leader myself, and I know that there are many, many great churches out there. And even churches that have some toxic elements might have large chunks of their ministry that are healthy and wholesome. But the fact that toxic churches and organizations exist is beyond any doubt. People experience them all the time. And in this last video, I will combine several types of toxicity into one session just to save some time. So hold on tight, because I'll be covering 3 causes of toxicity, including a humanistic message, tolerance of sin, and apathy. In this third decade of the 21st century, the first 2 may sound a little old-fashioned, so I'll save them for a bit later. Apathy is always considered a bad thing, so let's take the easy one first. Apathy is not only toxic, it usually kills a church. It starts with a percentage of the church feeling as though they don't want to do much beyond show up on Sunday mornings. It then becomes difficult to run services and programs, which puts a greater strain on those who are still willing to serve. At some point, those still willing to serve and volunteer get so discouraged that they start quitting too. Programs and ministries shut down, people exit, which accelerates the cycle until just a few faithful remain. If those faithful few cannot attract new folks and can't keep even a basic program running, they're forced to shut down the church, close the doors, and walk away. I saw this during my very brief teaching time in Scotland. Church buildings were very abundant, but active churches were very scarce. Many buildings were converted into community centers, discos, pubs, and even mosques. Apathy is toxic because it causes those willing to be involved to break down under the increasing demands of a dwindling volunteer pool. It results in sadness, bitterness, and sometimes disillusionment with the whole Christian thing. Okay, let's tackle the remaining 2 reasons for toxicity in this video. First is a humanistic message, and that can be toxic as well. And maybe that sounds a bit odd, so let me explain. A humanistic message can be toxic for 2 reasons. First, because the church's message ends up becoming no different than the overall message given elsewhere in society. In the news media, on the internet, in our public schools and entertainment, the message is no different. From these and other sources in society, there's a set of values and an attitude towards life that's fairly consistent across the board. And that attitude is that there's probably no God, or if there is a God, he doesn't really matter since he doesn't get involved in our lives. So it's human interests that matter. It's human betterment. It's human fulfillment. It's human values. Some kind of decent life for human beings. And when churches preach that message and minimize God's role, they become irrelevant. When churches talk less and less about God and instead magnify the importance of human beings, then many people conclude that going to church is a waste of time. It's no different than any other message. Why should I support the church? Why do I volunteer in the programs of the church? There's much less motivation to do so because the church is just like every other institution in society. It doesn't offer anything distinctly different. People might as well serve on the PTA instead. They might as well be on a committee for some community organization. Why bother with the church since it's just one more institution pushing the same thing? Churches with a human focus can be toxic to people who are expecting something different, needing something different, something that actually addresses their deepest problems and fixes some of the things that society promises to fix, but often does not deliver on. Another reason why humanistic message can be toxic is that it gets people to focus on themselves. As I said, God is minimized. They don't think about God's glory. They don't think about God's kingdom. They don't think about God being the source of all good things and the ultimate answer to what people are really needing and searching for. They just assume that it's all about them. And the truth is that sometimes churches who preach a humanistic message actually increase in membership. These churches may offer classes and studies on how you can have a better marriage or how you can get your finances under control, how you can escape certain addictive behaviors. The church provides your kids with good, clean fun, all of that kind of thing. And mind you, none of those things are bad. But if that's the emphasis, then people forget God and just concentrate on improving and even indulging themselves. And that was never the key to fulfillment. What happens then is that people who are looking for something beyond themselves, something bigger than themselves, don't find it in church. All they find is a bunch of people who are focused on themselves, which is toxic. Finally, there's tolerance for sin. I know lots of people would say that the word sin is old-fashioned and out of style. I can't help it. The Bible uses the word for Pete's sake, and it actually describes something that almost everybody believes in: bad thinking and bad behavior. Most people will acknowledge that certain types of behavior are bad, such as treachery towards people that we have responsibilities to, defrauding people of what's rightfully theirs, damaging people who are vulnerable to us. Most people are disgusted when others act in debased ways and diminish what God has created us to be. All those things the Bible calls sin. And of course, there's also sin against God himself, which is actually ungratefulness to the Creator who made us and gave us so many blessings. People hate ingratitude. So I think in a way, we all believe in sin. We just don't call it that. When a church gets soft on sin, it begins to become toxic. Now, I'm not saying that churches should paint scarlet letters on the foreheads of people that are caught in some kind of sexual behavior. I'm not saying that we should shun people who do things that we don't approve of. What am I saying? Well, I'm saying that churches are supposed to call things what they really are. Hurting people, speaking and dealing falsely, displeases God. Debasing ourselves, disregarding the truth, disregarding justice, love, and grace are very toxic. Societal trends bear this out. Churches and church groups that have minimized sin in our society have tended to decline dramatically in the past couple of decades. When churches begin to say that things are now okay, which have been traditionally regarded as wrong throughout many cultures, what happens? Well, those churches have tended to dwindle in size as people leave. And why do they leave? Because many people are looking for something that upholds standards of goodness and truth and justice and rightness. When the church's message and values becomes no better than the nightly news or the latest hot movie, people conclude that they're wasting their time in church. They think, I may not live up perfectly to the values myself, but I want some place where those values are at least upheld so that I can aim at something. Tolerance for sin becomes toxic in another way. When sin is tolerated in a church, inevitably sinful behavior is going to be engaged in within that church body, which will end up hurting people who are part of the church. Ironically, even out-and-out unbelievers tend to disapprove of churches who tolerate sin. They're often the first to point it out, in fact. I thought you were Christians. You preach to us, and then you do the very thing you preach against. So any chance of unbelievers being drawn to Jesus because of the beauty of Christian living, Christians living well and loving each other, goes out the window. I hope you've enjoyed this series on the toxic church. Together, let's make a difference so that churches can heal, so that they can focus on their mission and fulfill their calling. This is Dr. Michael Bogart with Aspect Ministries. I have many, many other videos on my website, aspectministries.com. You might want to check them out. Hopefully you'll find them helpful and inspiring. See you next time, and God bless.